Please
This
remind
conference will now be recorded.
that I tend to forget because I don't do that usually. Okay, thank you. What are the options? I may have an existing single target matrix, right? When I say single target, basically I've not defined any eligibility criteria. For example, my matrix is just pay ranges and compa ratio, right? There are no targets I have defined, which means I have not included any eligibility criteria. In that case, this particular task, I can be using it to convert a single target matrix, which means there are no eligibility rules, into a multi-target matrix, right? So I have an existing compensation matrix. I can go to the task and add eligibility rules for that existing compensation matrix. Or as I mentioned, you can basically select an existing compensation matrix which already has eligibility criteria, change those eligibility criteria, add additional eligibility criteria, remove existing eligibility criteria, or any other thing you want to do, right? So you can basically use this task to convert a single target comp matrix. So I'm not showing this in tenant because we already understand, right? This is something we had discussed all these aspects on Friday's class. uh, I think Monday to guys, give me a second. Okay, convert a single target matrix to a multi-target, sorry, matrix, or I can use it to basically change the eligibility criteria. And when I say change, add, edit, delete, whatever, right? On an existing multi-target matrix. Okay, so that was our amount based compensation matrices. Now, your percentage based and your weighted range are basically the same. In fact, your percentage range is exactly the same. The only difference is you don't have the option to select default currency, right? Because any which ways the currency would be defaulted based on my existing base pay currency, right? So even if I assign the same compensation range and I'm a manager as you are, let's assume, so I get 5% and you get 5%, but for me system would default convert or calculate that 5% in terms of my base pay currency and in terms of my base pay, whereas for you it will be in terms of US dollars, for example, if that is your base pay, right? So I don't need default currency for percentage range. uh, Apart from that, it is exactly similar to my amount range, right? So I'm saying an employee who exceeds expectation in the and has a compa ratio of 1, he gets a 5 to 10% increase, right? And an employee who is achieved in the same compa ratio gets 4 to 8%, just as an example, instead of directly specifying an amount. Okay, now the question is, what is a weighted range? Okay, now in weighted range, the difference is I am again just like my percentage range, and let me quickly show that to you. So create compensation matrix. I'm not sure if we have already created one. Uh, one 2010 WB. Let's call this CM1 so that we can. Okay, let me quickly show a percentage range. I'm selecting, let's say again, rating scale, and maybe let's, this is all I need, right? So underperformed, I can say it is 0 to 1% increase, right? And this is 1 to 5% increase, and this is 6 to 15% increase, right? So this is what I am doing. Okay, let me delete this. Okay. However, when it comes to weighted matrix, right? And let me go ahead and create one. Okay, when it comes to weighted matrix, and again, let me select rating scale just to keep it simple. I'm not selecting anything else. Now, even over here, when I go in here, you'll see that the options are exactly the same, minimum and maximum. right? Okay, and I'm saying it is 0 to 0, or let's give it 0 to 10, and here I'm saying 50 to 100, and here I'm saying 100 to 110. Okay, when I do okay, you see that even over here, actually the ranges are in terms of percentage, right? Then what is the difference between a weighted matrix and a percentage matrix? The difference is, in a percentage matrix, when I define a percentage, my compensation increase is represented in terms of that percentage, right? So if my existing compensation is 1000 and I say he gets a 10% increase, let's assume, based on the compensation matrix, then I get 10% of 1000, right, which is 100. Okay. On the other hand, if I create a weighted matrix and say an underperformed person gets 10%, what it means is I get 10% of my actual target. So if my actual target is, let's say, 1000 rupees, right, which is my target amount that I'm supposed to get, then I would only get 10% of that 1000, right? So this is not an actual 10% increase on my existing base salary. This is 10% of the target that you are supposed to get, right? Again, when a person achieves, I'm saying he's getting 50% to 100% of his target, right? Which means if I'm supposed to get a 10% increase, I'll get 5 to 10% increase, right? 50% of 10% is 5%, right? So minimum I'll get 5% increase, maximum my target is 10%, so I'll get a maximum of 10% increase, right? Or if I talk it in terms of amounts, if I'm supposed to get 1000 rupees, then I may get anywhere from 50% of that 1000, which is 500, to 100% of that 1000, which is 1000 rupees, right? And this is, again, I should be getting 1000 rupees. I have exceeded performance. I'll get anywhere from 1000 to 1100 rupees, right? So your weighted matrix is basically a percentage of your target, whereas your percentage matrix is basically a percentage increase on your existing base pay, right? Or your existing eligible earnings, based on which your merit increase is to be calculated, right? Okay, so percentage increase, as I mentioned, this is, for example, I can say 4 to 5% of your eligible earnings, right, or your base pay, right? So it is probably, if your base pay is 1000, so you're getting 4 to 5% of 1000, right? Okay, whereas your weighted is basically can be uh, 80 to 100% of your target increase. Okay, so that is your now system. Actually, how does system determine a target, right? We'll talk about those aspects as we design our matrix plan, right? Again, just like your eligibility rules on your compensation plans, wherein your compensation plans, their amounts, system follows a precedence, right? It would take any plan which is assigned to your job profile, or any grade which is assigned to job profile, has a higher precedence over your grade which is defaulted based on the eligibility rules, right? And we have already spoken about that precedence when it comes to your plan defaulting or your grade defaulting. Similar to that, with respect to assigning your targets as well, we'll see that system follows a algorithm, right, or a specific precedence. Okay, so we'll talk about that
What,
aspect later.
Ali?
Mhm. Yeah, go ahead.
What is the target? We are saying that
So target
80% of
is
target, but what is the target?
right. Yeah. So if I go to Steve's profile, for example, so target is the expected target increase that I am supposed to get. Right. So let's see if he has any compensation assigned or any matrix plan assigned. Okay. So his target is 4% annual. Right. And if he achieves, he'll get 100% of 4%. Right. Which means he can expect that he'll get full 4%. Right? So this is basically the target which is assigned to the employee, right? And in compensation matrix, I'm basically defining whether he'll get full 100% of his target, right? Or maybe he'll get 120% or only 50% or 0%, right? So again, this is just assignment and actual increase I'm going to get. I'm defining in terms of my compensation matrix in the compensation review process, right? Again, something we'll talk about when we create our matrix plan, when we actually run our compensation review process. Okay, just to uh, tie, tie things together, let me quickly show that as well, right? Not in detail, but what I'm saying here is, so for example, when I assign a plan to an employee, right? System would propose a target for the employee based on what is defined on the merit plan, right? But then if you see here, right, I can actually go ahead and define so that 4% that this employee Steve Morgan has received, this is basically the default target. So this is basically the percentage increase. Just like on an allowance plan, I say that car allowance is 10%. Similarly on this merit plan, and let's see what all is configured. Again, will not go in detail. Different defined on the plan target or defined on the plan profiles, right? System automatically proposes based on the eligibility criteria a target. But then I can override that target as well. For now, it is not overwritten. So it's getting the default target of 4%, which is just assigned to the worker, right? But then at the time of actually running his compensation review, there based on multiple factors, his actual performance, the compa ratio, uh, the company performance, his uh, CTC, and all those factors that I want to consider, I would then give him an actual increase, which could be in terms of amount, in terms of percentage, or in terms of weighted. Make sense?
Eh,
Still doubts? Okay. All right. So
Yeah,
don't worry. Any which ways will tie all those things together, and that is why I did not speak about that earlier, because it just becomes a bit confusing uh, if I introduce that concept here. Okay. Let me create a merit plan, right? And let's create a simple plan to start with, right? I'll not save this first. Once we have spoken about all aspects, that's when we'll save. We'll actually save it. Okay, I'm creating a merit plan. Again, just like an allowance plan, I can create an amount based plan, I can create a percentage based plan, right? Okay, but at this point in time, we are not interested in any of the other aspects. So the plan itself is divided into four sections. The first one is the details, award calculation, right? uh, Plan eligibility, process eligibility, and then my plan profiles, right? Again, we'll talk about all these sections later. What I'm going to talk about now is your plan eligibility and then process eligibility. Okay, so what is plan eligibility? I define my plan eligibility in terms of eligibility rules and waiting period. So if I go back to my checklist, what is the next thing that I need to define? The compensation eligibility rules, right? So this basically defines, this is just like my eligibility criteria on any other plan, right? My allowance plan, my salary plan, my stock plan, my one-time payment plan. So this is basically that eligibility criteria, which basically identifies who would be eligible for this plan when the plan is assigned to the employee or proposed to the employee at the time of a compensation event. So hiring, change, job transfer. So earlier I was an individual contributor, wherein I have a plan A, merit plan A, but then now I get promoted to a manager, and because now I'm getting promoted to a manager, I'm now eligible as part of this change job to a merit plan B, right? And how does this work? Based on the eligibility criteria, right? So your eligibility rules, they identify your eligibility to a plan at the time of assignment during a compensation event, right? So again, pretty straightforward. We already know that. So your comp, or just write it, let us just write it, your eligibility rules, right? So these identify eligibility of an employee to the plan, right, at the time of staffing and compensation change events, right? The eligibility rules identify your eligibility for a plan when you're being hired, transferred, change job, or any other compensation change event, right? So plan is assigned to the employee profile based on the eligibility criteria. Okay, we don't have to discuss about this anything anymore, right? This is something we already know. Okay, now what is the next part? The next part is your compensation eligibility waiting periods, right? And here I have mentioned this eligibility rule basically controls your plan assignment. Your compensation eligibility waiting period basically is used for your compensation review process. Okay, now if I go back, what did I say about a merit plan? So you create a merit plan and assign it to the employees, right? At the time of proposed compensation, hire, request compensation change. So again, for Steve Morgan, this plan is assigned to him, right? Maybe when he was hired. Okay, the compensation review process is then used to implement those proposed changes. So all that compensation matrix I spoke about, it will actually come into picture when you actually run your compensation review process at the end of the year, right? To determine the merit increase which actually Steve Morgan should get, right? So that's where your compensation matrix comes into picture. And then based on the performance rating, based on the rate comparison, all those other factors, then system would actually determine this is 4% is Steve Morgan's target merit increase, but his actual merit increase is 10% or 0% or 5% or whatever, right? Now your eligibility waiting periods also come into picture at the time of compensation review process. So if I go back, the next aspect of my merit plan is your waiting period, right? And what is this waiting period, right? Again, this is very self-evident, right? We live it every day in our or when we join an organization. So in my organization, the merit process starts on April the 1st, right? Okay, which means 31st March is the last day of our uh, process or merit period, right? On 1st of April, our merit actually kicks in, right? But then only those employees who joined my organization as of 31st December, only those employees are, they would be eligible for actually getting a compensation increase, right? Only those employees are considered in the compensation review process, right? So I hire an employee, let's say on 1st of Feb, right? When I hire this employee based on his eligibility criteria, right? System assigns him to a merit plan A, right? So this is where your eligibility criteria is coming into picture. But then on the plan itself, I have defined a waiting period of 3 months after hire. So I'm saying only those employees who are in my organization for a minimum of 3 months, they would actually get involved into the compensation review process, right? Now, even though my employee is assigned this plan, right, at the time of joining or hiring or change job or promotion or whatever, they would not be actually getting any merit increase in the compensation review process because system would not even consider them, right? So your waiting period is basically the minimum amount of time that an employee should wait to be included in the review process, right? So again, two different aspects. One is your eligibility period. I have Okay, all right. So guys, I usually do not see my chats or pings. You have anything? I just saw them now. Okay, all right. Okay, so your waiting period identifies whether you are eligible for being included in the compensation review process or not. Okay, so and we'll see how your waiting periods are created. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Any questions on what we discussed? So your eligibility rules and your eligibility waiting periods. Okay, so your comp eligibility waiting periods, right? They restrict employees' eligibility to the compensation review process until after the employee satisfies the uh, waiting period criteria, right? Uh, okay. Uh, okay. So